Welcome to Spooky Ass Shit Special Edition. I am your host, Eric Dwinnells. You guys, there is such big news in the true crime world this week. I can't believe I'm saying this, but they have caught the Golden State Killer, also known as the East Area Rapist, also known as the original Night Stalker. We've talked about him briefly on the show before, on the episode about the creepiest audio recordings. You can hear his voice in a voicemail that he left for one of his victims after the attack. And I was actually planning on doing an episode in the not-too-distant future specifically about this individual and the clues that we have to his identity. And also, what I really wanted to get into was what made him a particularly scary killer. Because there's lots of serial killers out there, but why has this one grabbed people in such a way? The people that know him, there's a lot of you out there who might not be familiar with this case. Don't worry, I'm going to go into it very briefly. I'm going to give you kind of an overview. What I want to talk more about tonight is the man that the police allege is the Golden State Killer. Of course, here in the United States, we do have the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. However, it seems that the police, at least, are very convinced that this is the man, and his name is Joseph James Deangelo. If you're a regular listener, you will know that I have not done an episode in a little while, and if you follow us on Facebook, you will know that I had an episode scheduled about Friday the 13th, Part 3, to come out. First, it was delayed because we had some technical issues with the equipment, and now it's further delayed because I just wasn't particularly happy with the episode that we ended up recording after we got the equipment fixed. So I'm going to go back, and that episode will happen with a little bit of tweaking, but I was so excited about this news, I said I have to do this now, and it's going to come out a little bit early even because I'm going away for the weekend. In fact, I will be at the Chiller Theater Convention in New Jersey. So if you're there, look for the big bald guy in the wheelchair, and that's me, and come say hello. But I'm recording this episode quickly. I am going to edit it just barely, maybe just take out some of the gaps in my, like that one right there, in my thinking. But otherwise, I'm pretty much going to leave it in, scars and all, and just put it out there because basically what I'm trying to do with this episode is process what's going on here, because this is something that I have been thinking about since the very first time I ever heard of this case was on an episode of Cold Case Files with Bill Curtis. Remember that show? I'm sure any of you true crime fans of a certain age out there do. That was the first time I heard it, and they played the recording on that episode, and they kept showing the ski mask, and I was just like, man, that's like fucking the creepiest thing ever, and I can't believe they haven't caught this guy, and the story only got crazier as the years went by. So this is something that I've been following for a very long time. I was never an internet sleuth about it or anything like that, but definitely I've been aware of the case and following it this whole time. And to be honest with you, they had DNA of the killer. We'll get into exactly how and all that, but they had the DNA of the killer since before they even knew what to do with DNA. So it seemed pretty likely that somehow, some way in the future, we would, in fact, be able to identify this man. But I guess just because I never thought fate would be so kind to deliver him to us in the way that he has been, I assumed that we would find him some years down the line from now, probably through a family connection, searching DNA databases and all that. We would find him, but he would have died 5 years ago or something like that. And so we'd have the name, but not really the satisfaction that, justice was served on this guy or anything like that. But it turns out, if this really is the killer, and like I said, the police seem convinced that he is alive. He's a 72-year-old man, but he's alive. He was living in the exact same neighborhood where many of the attacks occurred. This is a breaking story, so I am going to go ahead and let you all know that anything that I say on this episode is what has been reported so far. As we know, reporters are not always right, especially with a breaking story. News moves quickly and things get put out that may or may not be accurate. I can't speak firsthand on any of these things. I am not an investigative journalist. I'm just a guy doing a kind of lighthearted podcast about paranormal and true crime. And I'm just going off what I've been able to find so far from what I would call reliable websites. But that doesn't mean that it's all 100% accurate. So I'm just doing my best here. And like I said, the real point in me doing this tonight is because in my personal life, I don't know anybody who's following the case or who has been following the case. So when I read online yesterday that they had made an arrest, I was so excited. And I had no one to talk to about it. I had no one to process this with me. So I guess that's what I'm doing tonight, even though I'm talking to myself, really, but hopefully I'm talking to you. I hope some of you are familiar with the case. If you're not, please keep listening because this is crazy. This is insane. The first crimes attributed to this man happened over 40 years ago. And he's just been a mystery since then, and he's one of the most prolific rapists and murderers that we've ever known. So the fact that he hopefully has been caught and that he's alive and he's going to be facing justice is amazing. And big round of applause for law enforcement. And I am excited for the victims, the many, many, many victims that he's left. And their families, and this is just a really exciting thing. I've been saying it all day to people that don't really know what I'm talking about. I'm like, they caught him. I mean, I was just discussing this case with a coworker because I had, listeners know that my ankle is broken, healing up, but it's been broken. Literally the first place I went since I broke my ankle, because I was housebound for weeks and weeks, 4 weeks. And then finally I was able to move around a little bit, but at great effort. But the first great effort I made to go out, I had a doctor's appointment. After that, I went to the bookstore and I bought Michelle McNamara's book, I'll Be Gone in the Dark. It had just come out. It was in February. It had just come out and I had a lot of time on my hands because I still wasn't back to work yet. So I picked up that book and that was what I read while I recovered. When I went back to work, I did not know this, but I have a coworker. Shout out to Jamie. How you doing, Jamie? Who is into true crime and this, the kind of things that I'm into. And she hadn't heard about this case. So I was telling her about it and I said, oh, you can borrow the book if you want. So just like I told her, let me give you a brief rundown of this case. Now, this is very, very brief. It technically starts with the Visalia ransacker. This was a guy that would break into people's houses and steal like little trinkety kind of things and just ransack the house, like tear up the house looking for things. But he never took anything of great value. He was spotted a few times. There was a sketch of him done. A lot of people theorized that this possibly was the first step in the criminal that would become known as the Golden State Killer. He's got a lot of names. We're going to get through it. Don't worry. But a lot of people kind of were convinced because the sketch of the ransacker didn't look anything like later sketches of the East Area Rapist or the original Night Stalker or the Golden State Killer. And there was just there wasn't really a lot of proof. This guy was cornered by cops at one point, and his actions didn't seem to be in line with what they thought the Golden State Killer would be like. So they thought it was a different individual, and again, he didn't look like the other suspect. It turns out that these crimes were related. The police have not said exactly how they know this, but they did. That was one of the things they said in the press conference, that yes, in fact, he was also the ransacker. So that started happening back in 70. I'm sorry, I'm going off the top of my head. I don't have all the dates and details written down exactly. If you want to listen to a podcast that really breaks down the case for you and gives you a lot of good detail. I highly, highly recommend the Case File 5-part series about the original Night Stalker Golden State Killer. I can't recommend it highly enough. It is riveting and terrifying and really well done. So I would recommend that. If you want something a little quicker, you can go on YouTube and look up the old Cold Case File episode about it. It's available on YouTube. And of course, you can read Michelle McNamara. Why can I not say her name? I'm too amped up, I think. Michelle McNamara. I'm trying. It's called I'll Be Gone in the Dark. Just ask for that at your local bookstore. It just came out, and I'm sure it's a bestseller. So yes, the ransacker. Then, starting in 1976, there is an individual who comes to be known as the East Area Rapist. This guy commits over 50 rapes. They think over 50 rapes, but at least 50 that we know of in the Sacramento area of California, in various neighborhoods. And he does this from 76 right on through to 79. So he's doing these crimes, right? And the police are aware that there's the serial rapist out there, and then he just kind of disappears from that point. But then, down south, in Goleta, Ventura, Dana Point, Irvine, they have a series of murders. And this is a suspect who will come into the homes of people at night, couples. He will tie up the man and you know, he bludgeons these people, basically. After committing sexual assaults on them. And this is known as the original Night Stalker. Now, these were all thought to be separate cases at first. There were some people who thought there might be some crossover, but they did collect evidence, and some of that they were able to extract DNA from, so that beginning in the mid-90s and culminating sometime in the 2000s, they were able to link all of these cases to one individual. So the East Area Rapist and the original Night Stalker were one and the same. They were not separate people working independently. They were the same person. Now, I don't want to get too gory on you guys or give out too many, wild details, but I do think it's important to talk about the nature of these crimes. So it started off when he was ransacking, of course, but then it progressed to breaking into a home and raping a woman who was alone. And then that from there progressed to breaking into homes where there was a couple. And he would tie up the man. He would then oftentimes place dishes on his back, dishes in like a cup and saucer. And he would tell the man, if I hear this move, I'm going to murder your whole family. So if the guy tried to escape and the dishes fell, he was going to murder the whole family. He would rape the woman, and then he bizarrely would spend a lot of time going through the house, but again, never taking anything of value, just little kind of trinkety things, maybe things of personal value to the victims, and sometimes steal photos of the victims. And then he would eat. He was always eating. And then he would come back and commit the rape again. Some of the victims really didn't get a good look at the assailant because he was always wearing some kind of mask, usually a ski mask, but sometimes like a nylon mask, and then sometimes what they describe as a leather hood, like the kind you might use if you were a welder, but without the metal part that comes down in front, but the hood turned around with some eyes cut out or something like that. So the actual victims never really got a good look at him, but there were always reports of prowlers in the neighborhood, and hang-up phone calls and stuff like that before the attacks occurred. Unfortunately, these were not always reported to police before the attacks occurred. And the public was not made aware that these were things that were very commonly happening before the attacks. So that seems like that was always one of the frustrating things before we had the suspect. If you were someone who was into the case and reading about it, it was just like so many people may have seen this guy. There were so many chances that perhaps he could have been stopped, and the ball was just dropped for one reason or another. And it was always one of the most frustrating parts. It still is, honestly, because who knows whose lives may have been saved, and it's still just a really frustrating part of the case. But the other thing I want to point out, because I think this should be known, in every single rape report, he was described as having a small penis. So now we know, if it's true, that Joseph Deangelo is the Golden State Killer, this is the guy with a small penis, consistently described as 5 inches or less in length and about the size of a quarter in girth. So take that for what it's worth, but it seems like a detail that should be put out there about this ass. Now, he would rape the women, and there was the whole thing about the town hall meeting. There was a man at the town. They had a town hall meeting to say, like, oh, okay, we want to talk about this, what's happening, this rapist and everything. And one of the men in the audience stood up and said, look, this is crazy. No man would let his wife be raped in front of him, and there's something the police aren't telling us. There's some kind of cover-up going on here. He made a big scene. That's how they consistently describe it. There's no exact dialogue that was taken down, but they say that he made a big scene. Well, then a few months after that, that man and his wife were victims. So it seems very likely that the suspect was there. I think that kind of covers the crimes. And then, like I said, he progressed. So he was the ransacker. Then he progressed to raping single women home alone. Then he progressed to raping women while the male was home. And then he progressed to double murder. That tends to be the way. It's usually not just someone wakes up and decides they're going to become a serial killer. There's usually steps along the way. And this very clearly was steps along the way. Now, I already told you that was going to be a brief overview of the crimes. Trust me, there's a lot more to say about it, but I'm going to save it for a different episode. I'd like to have a guest come and discuss this with me. But I do want to talk about what we have here, what we think we know about the suspect, Joseph James Deangelo. These are what I have been able to find so far. He was born in New York State, but he was raised in California, and he graduated from high school just outside of Sacramento. He enlisted in the Navy, and he served in Vietnam, and he also won some distinctions and medals for his service. He returned from Vietnam, and he got a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. From 1973 through 1976, he worked as a police officer in Exeter, California. This is near Visalia, where the ransackings took place. From 1976, the year the East Area Rapist attacks began, till 1979, he was a police officer in Auburn. Now, he was a police officer, but he got fired. Why did he get fired? Because he was caught shoplifting. What was he shoplifting? He was shoplifting a can of dog repellent, which I didn't even know was a thing, but apparently it is. Dog repellent and a hammer. His superiors on the force said, okay, well, we're going to give you a hearing, and then we'll figure out if you're still going to have a job or not. And Deangelo said, no, I don't want a hearing. That's okay. I'll just take the firing. How this didn't raise any red flags, we don't know. Times were different back then. With hindsight, of course, everything seems very clear. but it seems like he basically didn't want the hearing because he didn't want people looking into why he had these items, why he was trying to get these items. But it seems pretty clear that the reason was this way he could have these items to use in an attack, and then if he happened to lose them somehow, it couldn't be traced back to him because he didn't even purchase them. Even with cash, there would be no sales girl who remembered him, buying these items or anything like that. That is a little bit of conjecture, but I think it's pretty reasonable to assume that that was a possibility. Some of these facts are, I shouldn't say facts, some of this information is a little bit sketchy. We don't know the ins and outs exactly yet, but we know that he got married sometime in the 70s, possibly in 73, and that marriage ended in divorce, or at least a separation, but we're not sure when that happened. He had at least one daughter who was born in 1981, and it is believed that he has more children, but I couldn't find confirmation on that anywhere. But it seems like the daughter born in 1981 would be the oldest daughter, and he was living with this daughter and his daughter's daughter at the time that he was arrested, which was yesterday. He was arrested on Tuesday. The news really broke about it on Wednesday. He had been working as a mechanic at a Save Mart grocery store chain warehouse until last year when he retired. His neighbors say that he was kind of a recluse, although they would often hear him swearing when he couldn't find his keys or while he was out doing yard work. Most of the neighbors kind of just describe him as like kind of the grouchy old neighbor who would complain if things were too loud and, that kind of thing. He's lived there. I don't see exactly how long, but at least since the 90s, according to some of the neighbors that I've seen interviewed. He's been there at least since the early 90s and possibly longer. As I pointed out, this is in Citrus Heights, which is a place that was frequently struck by the East Area Rapist. And now, if you're wondering why there's so many names, again, it's because they were thought to be crimes of different people. And then, actually, it was Michelle McNamara who coined the name Golden State Killer because, essentially, it was too hard to explain that, this is the East Area Rapist / original Night Stalker. Well, let's give him one name that we can all learn and let him go by. So that is when she coined the Golden State Killer, because he attacked in Northern California and then later in Southern California. He put fear through the whole state. So it's the Golden State Killer. That's how he is commonly referred to now. That's how they referred to him at the press conference. Sorry, I'm mumbling my words here, but I'm speaking fast and trying to read notes at the same time, and I'm trying to get this recorded rather quickly. So do forgive me if I am not my usual professional self. But I'm doing the best that I can here to give you guys a nice, quick, but worth it episode. Now, we know that he was captured through DNA. And I just read a new report saying that they got the DNA off one of those genealogy websites. They didn't say which one, but, something like Ancestry.com or 23andMe or something like that. This is a bit of speculation, but I know that they had been doing this, so this is most likely what happened, that they entered the DNA into the database of this website, whichever one it was, and it came up with a match. According to some reports that I have read, victims who were contacted by the investigators to say that the suspect had been arrested, according to report that I read, the victims state that the police told them that the DNA came from the daughter, or at least one of the daughters. One of the daughters had entered their own DNA into this database. It came up as a match with the suspect, And the police then kind of used that information to track who could be a good suspect in this family, and that is what led them to Joseph James Deangelo. Again, that report just came out. Hopefully it's true, but take everything that I say here with a grain of salt. It is important to note, I think, that Deangelo was never a suspect until a week ago. He doesn't appear in any police reports. He's not known to even like the internet sleuths that have been working on this. This is a complete dark horse that just came out of nowhere. Police then performed a stakeout at Deangelo's residence, and they basically report that he really wasn't up to much, and he didn't leave the house very often. He is a retired 72-year-old man, and they kind of imply that he was just staying in home for days, but they were trying to get some discarded DNA from him. So I don't know if that means through the trash or whatever. They are not identifying how they got his DNA. They just say they got it from something that he discarded and it had his DNA on it. They're not saying what or how they got it. But they also did not want to take him while he was at home. They wanted him to leave the house. This way he wouldn't be able to grab a weapon or, commit suicide or something like that. So finally he emerged from his home on Tuesday afternoon, and that is when police apprehended him. The police say that he looks surprised, and they say that he looks like he was trying to remember a plan that he may have had in mind for this very moment, but that the police kind of swooped in on him so quickly he never had a chance to put anything in motion. He did allegedly state that he had a roast in the oven. Police told him that they would take care of it, and they have stated that Deangelo is talking. What that means exactly, we don't know, although it seems like he might have admitted to being the ransacker as well, because they did definitively link those crimes, which, again, a lot of people were kind of, even in the book, I'll Be Gone in the Dark, they kind of say, like, yeah, we don't really think he's the ransacker. I always held out that he probably was, because, again, it just seems like a natural progression to me, and after watching all these true crime shows and my armchair detective senses, I just said, okay, I think this probably was him. One thing I was wrong about, though, and apparently a lot of people were, they repeatedly said that this was a young person. Most witnesses say that he was maybe in his late teens to about the age of 25. There are a few that state that he was maybe 25 to 35. He actually, in 1976, when the rapes started occurring, he would have been 30 years old. So much older than, well, maybe not much older. They did kind of give an age range, and that's still within the range that they gave. But yeah, I had in my head that he would be a younger guy with long hair. Based on the pictures that they've turned up so far, there's only 3 or 4 that they've posted online that I've seen so far. But he doesn't have long hair, which is something that they kind of said, that he had kind of stringy hair, that he had collar-length hair. So far, the pictures don't really bear that out. But I would not be surprised to learn that he was actually wearing wigs and fake facial hair when he was performing these prowlings and stakeouts, because he kind of stalked his victims. Not kind of, he flat out stalked his victims most of the time for weeks, maybe even months before performing the attacks. And it also seems like he had multiple possible victims chosen in every neighborhood. Again, we'll go into detail on these crimes some other time, and I again recommend you to case file. But it's creepy as fuck. That's basically it. It's some spooky ass shit for sure. He only kind of resembles some of the composites. I've heard some people say that, oh, he looks just like this one, or I think he only kind of looks like some of the composites. He's like if you see the picture of him now, he's like a real pumpkin-headed guy. And the ransacker was described as moon-faced, and it does appear that he probably had lost some weight between when he was ransacking and then when he started the rapes, because he was always described as very thin, whereas the ransacker was described as a little bit hefty, stocky, I guess you could say, and moon-faced. But the other sketches show him, very thin-faced and everything by the time he's committing the rapes and murders. But as I said earlier, the actual victims didn't get a look at his face. The people who got a look at his face were the people who reported prowlers and having a confrontation with a prowler. So that's where those sketches come from. They're not from victims of the actual assaults. They're from people who saw a prowler in the neighborhood. So it might not even have been the Golden State Killer. It could have just been a prowler or just a guy taking a shortcut through the yard or who knows what. But some of them do kind of resemble him, and as I said, I wouldn't be surprised to find that he purposely was disguising himself because he was a police officer, he was familiar with police techniques, and this might be ways that, and I mean, it doesn't take a rocket science to know if you're going to go do something illegal, it might be good to use a disguise. So there's that. One thing I do find interesting, there is one composite that was done of the man wearing a ski mask, and it's a guy wearing a ski mask. So it's kind of like, well, why'd you even bother doing a composite? But if you look at it, it looks like it's kind of, the head is kind of triangular shaped. And I thought that the reason it kind of broadens out towards the back is that this was long hair hidden underneath the ski mask, right? But if you look at the actual mugshot of Joseph Deangelo, which you can find just about anywhere online, but of course I will post it on the website spookyas.com or spookyasshit.com. They both take you to the same place, and that is the show's blog page. On this particular episode, you will see the composite sketches, and you will see a picture of Joseph Deangelo himself, the mugshot that they took. And the interesting thing about that mugshot is that his jaw, I mean, he's an old man now, so he's a little bit weathered looking, but it looks like you can see that his jaw is actually, I don't know what the technical term would be, but the back of his jaw kind of sticks out in a triangular shape. So perhaps when he was younger and thinner, this is actually what was supposed to be represented in that sketch. It's not that hair was sticking out, it's that his jaw was kind of sticking out in that way. So that became a very interesting sketch to me. Another very interesting thing to note, which I think is worth pointing out, is that he started the murders in 1979, but then in 1981, he stopped. And Deangelo, his oldest daughter was born on 9/9/1981, just over a month after the last murder was committed. Well, the last murder for a while, because we don't see any activity that we know of from the Golden State Killer until 1986. Now, allegedly, this is the year that a second daughter is born. I don't have confirmation on that, but that is what I've read in some of the reports or what I've heard from other sources. And that's the last murder that we know about. He did still make some harassing phone calls to past victims after this time, but that is the last attack that we know of. However, I wouldn't be surprised if there's more that were just never linked to him for one reason or another, and that we're going to find out more about him. You certainly will find out more about him if you stay tuned to this show, because this is a fascinating case for a multitude of reasons, and I definitely want to get more in-depth as to his crimes. There were many, many, many crimes, and we won't cover each and every single one of them, but I will kind of guide you through his typical MO and how Joseph Deangelo may have been in the right place to commit this, and what's going on with him. And of course, hopefully, definitely further details will emerge. And this is just going to be a really fascinating one to watch and discuss. And I hope that you will join me in being very interested in this case so that I'll have someone to talk to about it. So please, if you found this episode interesting, find us on Facebook. You can find us at facebook.com/spookyas, and we can talk about it there. We can talk about it on the website that I already mentioned. I'm not going to do all the usual plugs. This is a different kind of episode. Also, though, before I go, of course, I expressed my congratulations to the victims and the fact that they are able to breathe a sigh of relief, hopefully, now that a suspect has finally been captured. The victims of the rapes and the victims of the murders and their families that are still with us. This has to be a tremendous day for you. But I also want to point out that this man, Deangelo, has a family. And no matter what he may have done, his daughters, especially if they are the ones that had something to do with connecting him to the crime and getting him caught, they deserve a good amount of sympathy too. I mean, their whole lives are going to be changed completely now. So I just want to express that as well, that I recognize that this is going to be a trying time for them. I'm not a thoughts and prayers kind of guy if you're a listener to this show, but this is something that is on my mind, and I just hope for the best outcome for everyone involved. I think that's as diplomatically as I can put it. So again, stay tuned. We'll be discussing this case further. I'm not going to go, I probably won't do it, right next week or anything like that. I know not everyone comes here for true crime stories. This is, we talk about old TV shows, we talk about ghosts, we talk about vampires, we talk about all that stuff. So we'll, it's not just going to turn over into Golden State Killer Central or anything like that. But it's definitely something I'm interested, something I want to talk more about, and we will talk more about it in the future. And now that hopefully, allegedly, the Golden State Killer has been caught, we can all sleep a little easier, and don't be afraid.